Um, just by way of summarizing, I'm going to be presenting, not facilitating today, the subtleties of facilitation. And why I'm here is to help you all learn as I have so that we're all more successful in earning a living. And what we're going to cover, what we're going to be covering is how to go about doing facilitation, the get ready, the get set, the go. And I'm not sure if this is a repeat for you. I apologize if it is. But the getting ready is understanding exactly what we're supposed to do. What's the desired outcome? Who's the audience? What's the culture of the audience? How long is it supposed to take? What's the environment? And most importantly, what is my role? The getting set is actually preparing my agenda, any tools that I need, exercises, how we're going to conduct it is whatever we're going to go do. And the go part is actually delivering the facilitated session. So the why we're here is to learn to be able to do this better. What we're learning is the aspects that I just talked about, and what I'm really talking about doing today is presenting to you some of the hows, some of those subtleties of getting ready, getting set, and then going. So the first step is getting ready for what? And I started to cover that I had a client that is typical. Anytime we think we can always understand expectations, we always have one where that doesn't happen. And with this one client, we stressed that what we were doing was not a training session, was not a keynote speech, but a facilitated session to raise the awareness for the audience. It was about 100 people from all around the U.S. to raise their awareness of what change management was all about as they embarked on a significant change for their business units. And what I did was organize 3 of my associates to help, and we delivered the one-day session in a combination of a large group, some breakout sessions where we were together, we broke apart, we got back together and reported back what we'd learned. We broke out again. Everything went really well. Everybody seemed to be very happy. And afterwards I heard from the sponsor that the training was great. But it wasn't supposed to be a training session. It was supposed to be a facilitated awareness session, and you can't train that in one day. So as much as I tried, I couldn't get clarity. But it is important that we understand what we're going to do. What are the desired outcomes? Is this a conflict resolution session where both parties only speak to me? Am I facilitating a brainstorming session? Building a plan, gathering requirements? What exactly is it that your expectations are? And by the way, I should mention that I think most of the audience are TAB facilitators who facilitate board meetings every month, and pretty much the board meetings are the same month after month after month. This talk today is about those one-off meetings. When you have a member come to you and say, can you do it for us? Can you facilitate a meeting? Can you facilitate our annual retreat? For those of you that are not TAB facilitators, there may be occasions where in your professions you're called upon to facilitate a meeting, and a lot of what we're talking about today applies. But what we're not going to be doing today is talking about facilitating a TAB board meeting. And you've probably all heard that if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Well, it's guaranteed if I don't know the expectations and the outcomes of what this facilitated session is supposed to yield, it's almost guaranteed that I'm going to miss the target. So when you can't find out what the customer wants, it's not because they're trying to be mean. In some cases, they don't know what they want. They don't appreciate the differences and subtleties of the nuances between brainstorming and planning. They would look at us and say, well, you're the expert, you figure it out. Or even worse, they'll say, I'll know it when I see it. So we really have to work to discover what it is that's going to delight our client and the audience. and I can tell you that if he won't or can't tell you, you need to find out, because you won't be valued when you miss the boat. You won't get follow-on work, you won't get referrals, and you might not even get paid. So I had to get really creative. I had a session about a year ago for a Chamber of Commerce. I was asked to facilitate a group of people, and when I asked about the requirements, all they really could tell me was they wanted me to energize and excite the audience. This was a group of volunteers that were basically going to go out and do the same kinds of thing for the next year that they had been doing. But we did talk about it would be really cool if we could find a way to make what they did more meaningful for them, benefit the chamber itself, benefit the members, the companies that pay dues to the chamber. So how do we help the businesses for whom these people worked? How do we help the chamber, and how do we help the customers of the chamber? It was election time, and so we nominated ideas. We did some brainstorming and came up with some ideas of things that would accomplish those three goals. They campaigned for those ideas. What we did was that the person that was the leader knew who the energetic leadership people were, the people who could get excited and energize the audience. So we picked three of them to come up and each of them picked two ideas, and they took turns campaigning for those ideas, why they would be a great thing for the audience to actually improve. We gave them each, I think it was 5 colored Avery dots, the Avery labels, and told them they could use those dots any way they wanted. They could vote 5 times for the same idea or vote for 5 different ideas. And they loved it. They were energized. We did produce deliverables in that we did prioritize the ideas to the ones that made the most impact. Started to plan to improve those processes and those steps, in that each of those ideas, we found someone in the group that was willing to be the task force leader, and the others who had raised their hands to volunteer were the seed people to be a committee to help make those improvements happen. And the thing I wanted to make sure you know is that I reviewed this plan with my sponsors beforehand, so they had ownership in what I was going to do and ensured that what we did was going to meet their objectives. Now, you're going to hear all the cliches when you talk to somebody about facilitating an event. You'll hear, well, we just want to get all of our ducks in a row, for instance. Well, what exactly does that mean? What do you expect when they walk out of the room at the end of the day, the end of the weekend, or the end of our session? What is it that needs to be done before that session, and what has to happen afterwards to achieve the desired result? What, in other words, are the priorities, the politics, the problems, and the pitfalls, etc., that are going to get in the way, and what do we have to do to work around those to make sure that when we're investing our time together, they are productive? I've also found it very useful to speak to some, if not all, of the participants in advance to uncover some of these issues of politics and priorities and pitfalls. Obviously, if I'm going to facilitate 100 people, I can't do that, but if it's a team of 5 or 6, we're well served to talk to the individuals to get their perspectives on what's worked in the past, what tends to get in the way, to kind of get our ducks in a row, so to speak. The other cliche we'll hear is, we just want to get them to work together. Wow. And when I hear that, I think, well, we're really expecting a behavior change here, which in my definition is part of culture. People's behavior is driven by their attitudes and beliefs, and it takes a long time to build a culture. It's going to take a long time to change it. So to expect them to work together after an hour or 2 hours, 2 days together, we really need to get them to start thinking differently and to agree on the next steps. They're going to need a model after the session to reinforce and to kind of help lead people after the session. I will facilitate the initial steps towards the desired result, but the person to whom all of these people report has a long-term commitment to reinforce those desired behaviors. So what are we doing? Are we just planting seeds for thought? I'll challenge the sponsor, the host, and ask, what's the vision? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the big picture? Where's the end result? And what have you accomplished so far? What do the participants hope for and expect? I did a retreat last month where after we had designed the activities, we heard about some misalignment, and we decided to do a survey of all the participants. This was basically for the whole company. And in doing that survey, we wanted to align them as to why we were having the retreat, what the outcome was, what the activities would be. And what we found out is 2 days before the retreat, we heard some additional grumbling, and we changed the activities again just before the retreat. And it was very, very good that we were flexible, because we actually put the pony on the table in the retreat. And while it was a little bit depressing, it was hugely beneficial, because we now can start to move forward. But we really have to understand what's working and what's not working and build on what's working. So if we understand what that vision is going to be, we want to understand what are the baby steps, what do we need to do in terms of steps to move closer to that result. What's a realistic next step? Is it requirements gathering? Is it brainstorming? Is it planning? Is it doing some kind of design work? And I mentioned earlier, we cannot underscore the importance of knowing about the audience. Who's involved? Who are these participants that are going to be with us? And why might they resist? What are their demographics? What are their learning styles? Most of us are familiar with DISC, communication behavior analysis. What are their profiles? What kind of biases and agendas do they have? What's in it for them? You know, they listen to that radio station, WIIFM, and we better understand what's in it for them, both for the long-term vision and to attend and participate in the facilitated session. How do we use this session to move them? What's going to work for them? Who do they listen to? And what are the consequences for them long-term and in participating in this session? We need to understand where they are in their change management journey. And I'm going to use a couple of terms here you may not be familiar with. One is the why, the what, and the how, which I talked about when we started this session. They need to know why we're doing this first. What's the purpose of leaving where we are today? What is it we're trying to achieve? And once I understand why we're moving forward and what we're trying to accomplish, only then does the how become relevant. Now I want to know who's involved, what are the baby steps, how long is it going to take, how do I get trained, etc. The second framework that I want to introduce you to is something called ADKAR. You may want to write this down. It's ADKAR, which stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. As they go down this journey, these are sequential, by the way. The first thing they need to do is to be aware that we're going to go down this journey. They have to have the desire, and once they have the desire, then we're in a position to start to give them the knowledge and ability to do the things they need to be doing. Too many times I see companies who start with training before they've gotten people to be aware of why it's important and to build a desire, what's in it for them. And once we've enabled them to do the things that they need to be doing, we need to be reinforcing and providing consequences that will enable people to recognize, yeah, it's important, and I am being recognized for my contributions, or there are some negative consequences if I don't. I've participated personally in sessions where I wanted the facilitator to force us to talk to each other and not listen to the pontification of the facilitator. We don't help clients if they become dependent upon us, in my opinion. So to me, it's all about getting the audience to be involved and to participate in what we're trying to accomplish. So as we go down this journey, we have to appreciate they want to know why before they're ready to consider what and how. And once they agree to why we're going on this journey and what's in it for me, they'll be open to the what, and the how becomes relevant. And as I mentioned, you have to be thinking about the change journey and where they are. The awareness, the desire, the knowledge, their ability, and then reinforcing the behavior. These have to be addressed serially, and if a step is skipped, you can expect significant resistance which may not be overcome. So we've talked about understanding the expectations, the getting ready. It's now time to get set. Now that we understand the objectives and the challenge, what do we do now? What are we doing in the facilitated session itself? What's the agenda? What are the activities within the agenda? What are the exercises? Is it sticky notes? Is it mapping? Do we have examples, etc.? How much time will each step take so that we don't run out of time, or worse, have lots of time to fill where we've wasted people's time? Are all of the activities as one big group, or will there be some subgroups? Do we need to assign group leaders if we're going to break into small groups? And how do we do that? Is there pre-work? Is there follow-up work? Who holds people accountable after we leave? These are all questions that we need to be thinking about when we're doing a facilitated session. Am I doing all the work? Am I the one that's writing the sticky notes, grouping them or affinitizing them, putting them in buckets, however you refer to that, coming up with labels for those groups, prioritizing them? Don't we really want to give the audience an opportunity to participate and maybe give them just enough, just-in-time orientation or training so that they can get out of their chairs and come up and actually participate? We may have to demonstrate for them in order to be able to do what we need, but we want them to be involved, to contribute, and to own what we come up with. And in fact, is a sticky note exercise going to be helpful as a baby step towards our desired outcome? I found that it's a great way to get started because you get everybody involved. Everybody feels like they've been heard, so to speak, but there may be other ways to move the ball forward. This one scares me. What happens when I leave? What do I have them do next? What is it they can do? Have I left them with something they can use? Are they prepared to take the next steps? I'm often asked the following questions, and we need to have good answers for these. Someone in the group will ask, how are you going to use what we develop here today? How does this fit into the big picture? And even more embarrassing potentially is, shouldn't we have considered some additional information before we got to this step in the process? We don't want to waste time gathering information we don't need, nor do we want to have to go back and redo information and say, remember when I did those interviews, here's some information that we forgot to get. Ever get this kind of look? I can't see you all, but some of you may be looking at like that right now. But you ever ask people to do something and you get these strange looks like, I have no clue what you're talking about? When you say, hey Joe, can you come up and draw us your process? Or Susie, can you share your strategies? Frank, tell us about your SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If they're not prepared for that, you're going to end up getting this kind of a look, and you don't want it. So I found that it's helpful sometimes to have examples, have a framework in mind. For those of us that are visual, maybe partially populate the model. Don't pay attention really to the contents of these models. They're merely there to to tell a story and to show how the structure is applied. Maybe you want to have a case study that they can do that they can then use in the model that or the framework that you're providing them with before they proceed with their own data. Oftentimes they want to know how what they're doing at this moment fits into the big picture. And this I call leveling. So what are we trying to accomplish, the big picture? And what is this retreat and how does it fit into that big picture this weekend? And what are we going to be doing over the next hour or two, and how does that task fit into the greater scheme of things? It's really helpful if you can show people and connect the dots between what we're doing now and what it is that this initiative involves. So you have to consider also that in your audience you have various, by intent, you have various types of people who are conservators and pragmatists and originators. The conservators are the people who want to maintain the status quo. They will take steps, but only in baby steps, towards where we want to get to, whereas the originators, even before we finish our sentence, are already starting doing the work. And the pragmatists are somewhere in the middle. They need more information than the originators, but not all of the data that the conservators need. If I'm in a room full of people and I say we're going to rearrange the tables in the room, the originators are already standing up, grabbing the tables and starting to move them, even before I say whether we're going to move them to a classroom style or a U-shape or whatever. The conservators want to know, well, which table's moving first, and do we get to, do we take our computers off the tables, or, who gets to go first? And you immediately start to see who's willing to move quickly and who's not. And when you're facilitating a group, you often have to move at the pace of the slowest person. Also, you all probably recognize that your audience is going to be auditory, kinesthetic, or visual communicators. They're going to want to hear, feel, or see the activities. And if that's not enough, when they're going down this journey, if you're having them learn something new, you have to recognize the adult learning styles. I'm not going to go into that today. That might be a topic for another BOSS webinar. But consider when you're facilitating intermixing lectures, exercises, stories, maybe add a little rhythm, etc. I'm not going to sing for you today. Keep them engaged, especially when you're in a room for a longer session. Intermix the use of an easel, PowerPoint slides, wall charts, etc., so that you can keep people engaged and address their communication and learning styles. So we got ready, we got set, and here we are. Now we're on stage. We're in the room. It's time to go. Hopefully you have someone introducing you, setting the context, sponsoring you, explaining what they're trying to accomplish and why you're the best person in the room to be there guiding them. It's a really good idea to write the introductory remarks for your host so that you ensure they say what you want. And so your first challenge, for those of you that have been paying attention, is to address the awareness. Why are we here? They want to know. But more importantly, you need to know. You need to know, did their boss even tell them why they're coming to this meeting? Did their boss tell them correctly, or maybe they have misperceptions? In my experience as facilitating workshops, in many cases, it was a training session, and I found out that people were there because they wanted to check off the box on the list of things they had to do in order to get their certification. That wasn't good enough for me. I needed to connect with why is it important for them to be there, aside from checking off the box. Isn't there some way that they can apply what they're going to be learning in their jobs and in life? Because if we haven't addressed why they're there, we're not going to get very much from them, nor will they from us. So what are we here to do? Are we just exploring each other's perspectives and ideas? They may be on board with the why, and they're aware we need to do something. They want to participate, but they want to know what we're doing. Are we just here to see each other's perspectives? Are we going to aggregate our thoughts and ideas? Are we going to develop a new process, a new strategy, a new system? You better be prepared to explain to them what you're going to be doing early on. And as I said earlier, oftentimes we need to get them to think differently. They have the awareness, they have the desire, but give me the knowledge to do this. You want me to think, and you want me to think about what? If we want them to move forward, don't we need them to acquire a little bit more knowledge, to see a different approach, hear each other's perspectives, share in the creation of a plan or a process or a product? Most of us on this call, as TAB facilitators, are driving to get better results for business owners. They need to act differently, but we know that their actions are driven by their thoughts and belief. So we facilitate their getting different input and thinking differently so that they can act differently and get better results. So outside of your TAB board meetings and coaching sessions, do you ever have a challenge to get a business owner to think differently? And isn't that my challenge this afternoon, to inspire each of you to think differently about how you facilitate? So how do we deal with skeptics? You want to have skeptics in the room, because if you can turn them around, the rest are going to follow. The skeptic can be real, can be active, it can be vocal. That's the best kind. And some techniques that I've tried when that skeptic is obviously derailing what we're trying to do, I may ask the group at large, what do you think about George's comment? And see if the group can help defuse it. That doesn't always work. And so I've found that rather than tell George, you're wrong, I say, George, you're exactly right. If I had the information you have, if I had the background you have, the perspective you have, I would have come to exactly the same conclusion that you've come to. And I want to make sure that as we go forward today, maybe we expose you to some other thoughts, some other information to either validate your perspective or maybe change it. If that doesn't work and they continue to persist, you write down what you've heard on I call it a parking lot, and say, George, I've heard you, I've captured your point, we'll address that later, or that will be addressed later, but we're going to move on. Now, even more dangerous, though, is you may have a skeptic that's quiet and not voicing his or her ideas. What are some ways to get them to open up? You may look around the room and ask the group, can anyone tell me what Joe is thinking? Joe looks pensive. Can anyone tell me what Joe is thinking or why? You might not always do this, but sometimes it works to give Joe the marker and say, Joe, maybe you'd like to come up and lead this discussion, share with us your thoughts, explain your point of view to us so that we can all benefit from it. But the other technique is to go ahead and assume, some of you probably are asking the question that Joe may be asking, and that is, why am I here, or why are we doing this? So go ahead and get that pony on the table. We all recognize that when we're doing facilitation, many times the reason we're there is because there's going to be some conflict. There are going to be some dueling parties. We can use a lot of the same techniques in dealing with conflict, but I found that generally when we have a conflict, we're often stuck because we didn't do the preceding step in the process particularly well. So I may ask the group, before we address this issue, can we back up a step and see if we can agree on what that step would be or would have been had we done that more thoroughly? Wouldn't it be a good idea first, for instance, to agree on the important criteria to make the decision or to evaluate alternatives. I had a client, John, who was a senior VP with about 600 employees, and his vice president, Chris. They were not pleased with each other. John wanted Chris to be a better leader and asked if we would help Chris. And we started with a session with John and Chris in the same room and asked them if they knew what it was that was causing their conflict. And John said, I want Chris to be a better leader. And Chris said, well, I'm glad to know that, but I don't know what it means to be a better leader. But if I did, then I would know what to work on to become a better leader. So we had to back up and define what a leader was, how John would observe it, and how Chris could go about trying to be a better leader. What resulted from that was a little project to help Chris develop a strategy for his business unit, because he had maintained, I can't be strategic. I manage a technology group, and every time the technology changes, the strategy changes. And so we helped him to put together a business strategy, but a byproduct of that was to coach him on being a better leader and coaching John on recognizing and reinforcing when he saw Chris being a better leader. But the point of this is, if you back up a step, you may find that that's where the root cause of the problem is, and you can facilitate a smoother conflict resolution by helping them do that preceding step. Define what it means and how to measure it. So what we've done today is we've explored the whys, the what's and the hows, the getting ready, the get set, and the go. We've touched on the awareness and desire, given you a little bit of knowledge, but not the ability and certainly not the reinforcement. You were made aware of the opportunity to join us today. Obviously, if you had the desire, you wouldn't have registered and actually attended. But the ability to do this is going to come with some practice, some feedback, some learning through books, videos, mentors and coaches, and the rewards, the reinforcement you're going to get is the rewards and the kudos that come with helping others and any compensation you might gain from it. If this feels strange, you may feel that this is going to be difficult. I can assure you that others have felt that way. I certainly did when I tried to do some of these things. But I found that these subtleties have made a difference in creating facilitation that my clients have loved. And so I'm at a point now where we're going to open it up for questions. Jan's going to help me with this. Most of the comments that we got so far had to do with our early communication challenges.
We have one question.
Okay, so we got Joe's question.
Do you want me to unmute the line?
Oh.
I can unmute them.
Yeah,
I can just ask it.
sure.
The conference has been unmuted.
So Joe is asking, what if I bring them up or ask them and they get combative? That's the danger that you have in bringing them up, is that they either can't do what you're asking or they take you on a tangent. So that is the one thing that is the riskiest part of all the stuff I talked about today. But when they get combative is when you need to use some of those conflict resolution techniques. But if this is where I say that there may be a pony in the room. So if you ask somebody to come up and share their perspective, then we can process that as a group. And if we don't, it's left unsaid, and the results of your session become diminished because you didn't address it. Joe, does that help? You can talk, Joe. Is Joe on the line still? Looks like we lost Joe. Okay. Other questions? You can type it in, or you can just go ahead and say, I've got a question, Bob.
Okay, what Rena has.
Rena, what would you recommend as the best option for brainstorming that will ensure everyone can participate? Rena, let me ask you a clarifying question. What are you asking there? Is there a specific challenge or practice that you're looking for?
Yeah, I suppose a lot of our facilitators have done some additional consultancy, and they always come back and want to know sort of what activities during that consultancy are the best for a brainstorming session, ideas generating, to make sure, though, that everybody gets a chance to speak.
Well, that's first of all, I'm guessing that you would agree, Rena, that in brainstorming there are no bad ideas. So oftentimes we'll break the brainstorming into smaller groups where everybody gets a chance to be heard as opposed to doing it as one big group. Ensuring that they each can write down through sticky notes or on a wall or whatever their ideas, that they're not lost, often helps to kind of diffuse that feeling that nobody's going to hear me. But you also want to make sure that everyone does participate. So if you see someone who isn't participating, you just call them out and ask them, George, what do you think about this? You haven't shared yet. And encourage the group to listen to George, because George may have the best idea.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah, that does. I've got a follow-up if nobody else has one.
Go ahead, Rena.
Do you use Tabanos with your members?
Well, with my board members, I do. Now, in this context, I may not be facilitating TAB members, but it is a good idea to have some behavior norms before you start the session, particularly if you know through your interviews that conflict is going to be a problem, or one person tends to dominate, or we have people who are sarcastic, or some people don't participate. So that's a great idea to not only state what those behavior norms are, but make them visible and enforce them.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Valerie, what books would I recommend? I have to be honest and tell you that I wasn't prepared for that question, but I will take it upon myself to email that to you, and I'm trusting that Jan can help me find your email address.
Everybody might.
In fact, we'll email that to all of the attendees. And in fact, to that note, when I do email that to you, if you have some books you'd like to recommend, please reply all and share it with the whole group. I am prepared to send not only these slides, but my speaker notes for those of you that might have been unable to capture what I said today. And if you just reply all with books that you recommend, that would be great as well. And Raina was going to ask for speaker notes, so yeah, and they're just my notes, so hopefully that'll put some of the meat behind some of these slides that didn't have specific content in them.
Yeah, great.
Certainly there are other questions. If that being the case, we're probably going to end up a little early. I wanted to thank everyone for attending. Jan, do you know when the next one is?
We have another BOSS webinar on the 6th of November, and then the TAB events page will have a list of additional ones as they are scheduled. Thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Bob, for sharing your knowledge on facilitation with us, and we look forward to seeing everyone at the next BOSS webinar.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Please stand by.